A sheriff kept harassing a black Air Force woman, but to his greatest surprise, she stood up for herself, and her strength shocked him. Before we get into this story, where are you watching this story from? Let me know in the comments. To better understand this story, we need to go back to the very beginning. If you believe in what's right, in treating people fairly, no matter the color of their skin, hit that subscribe button and join the movement. Only those who do not care for justice will refuse to subscribe. Now let us begin. It was mid-morning at the bustling Air Force Base, where soldiers moved around, preparing for a routine day of training. The sun was bright, casting a warm glow over the hangars and barracks. Among the busy crowd, Sergeant Amara Williams walked with purpose. She was in her late 20s, tall and strong, with an air of confidence that matched her years of hard work. Her duffel bag swung over her shoulder as she made her way toward the briefing room. Ready for another challenging day, Amara had earned her place in the Air Force, rising through the ranks through sheer dedication and skill. She was known among her peers for her professionalism, discipline, and unwavering work ethic. No one doubted that she belonged here, except perhaps one person. Sheriff Darren Collins, a young cop with a history of making inappropriate comments, was standing by the entrance to the hangar. His posture was lazy, and his eyes roamed the base, looking for something to entertain him. He spotted Amara walking past, her head held high. His smirk appeared before the thought even fully formed in his mind. "Hey, Williams," Darren called out, his voice carrying over the noise of the base. "Shouldn't you be in the kitchen instead of strutting around here, playing soldier?" His words were meant as a joke, something to make his friends laugh, but the arrogance in his tone was clear. He had always made offhand remarks like this, thinking they were harmless banter. But Amara didn't stop walking. She kept her eyes straight ahead, not giving him the satisfaction of a reaction, even as he continued to sneer. The mess hall was quieter than usual, with soldiers scattered around, taking a break from the morning's drills. Amara stood in line at the counter, waiting for her meal. She wasn't one to make a scene, but she always carried herself with quiet confidence, aware of the eyes that sometimes followed her. As she reached for a tray, Darren Collins appeared beside her. He leaned against the counter, his posture lazy, his smirk familiar. It didn't take long for him to make his move. "Shouldn't you be cleaning the floor instead of being in here, Amara?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's more your style, right?" Amara didn't flinch. She kept her eyes forward, her hands steady as she picked up her food. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice calm, but the cold edge in her tone was unmistakable. Darren's smirk only grew. "Oh, come on, I was just kidding," he said, pretending to wave it off. "But really, you people, maybe you should know your place here." The words hit her like a slap, but Amara didn't let it show. She stood tall, her gaze unwavering, meeting his eyes with a steady, controlled calm. "The only place I belong is where I've earned the right to be," Amara said, her voice firm but not raised. "Don't make assumptions about me, Collins." Darren chuckled, brushing it off like it was nothing. "Oh, look at you getting all worked up," he said, clearly thinking she was just being sensitive. "Don't get so defensive." But Amara stood her ground, unshaken. She wasn't going to waste her time on someone who didn't understand respect. Darren, on the other hand, laughed it off, believing he'd won, as if his words hadn't even made a dent. Later that afternoon, the training session was in full swing. Soldiers lined up in their respective groups, preparing for drills. The sound of boots hitting the ground and instructors shouting commands filled the air. Amara stood among her peers, focusing on her equipment as she prepared for the next exercise. Darren, who had been watching her from the sidelines, saw an opportunity to push her buttons again. He walked up behind her, his voice carrying across the open space as the other soldiers looked on. "I don't get it," Darren said loudly, mocking her every word. "I mean, what did you do to deserve this job?" The words were more overt this time, laced with the kind of racist entitlement that had always fueled his arrogance. Amara's grip on her training equipment tightened, her knuckles turning white as she fought to maintain control. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, but she refused to let him see the anger. With a steady voice, she turned to face him. "I worked hard to be here," Amara said, her eyes narrowing slightly as she met his gaze. "Something you wouldn't understand, I bet." The other soldiers stood quietly, unsure of what to make of the exchange. Darren smirked, emboldened by the attention from the others. He could feel their eyes on him, and he fed off the idea that he was getting under her skin. "Oh, I understand just fine," Darren sneered. "It's not about working hard. It's about knowing your place." Amara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned back to her equipment, letting her actions speak louder than words. Darren, seeing that he hadn't gotten the reaction he wanted, stood there, glaring at her with a mix of frustration and disbelief. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky as soldiers filed out of the training facility, chatting among themselves. Amara walked with purpose, her eyes focused ahead, when she heard Darren's voice calling out from behind her. He had been following her all day, and she knew this was coming. Amara stopped just outside the door, her fists clenched at her sides as she turned to face him. He was grinning, clearly eager for another confrontation. "You think you can just disrespect me over and over again without facing any consequences?" Amara's voice was low, but filled with fury. Her calm exterior barely masked the boiling anger beneath. Darren stepped closer, not backing down. His tone was mocking, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. "What are you going to do about it, huh? Tell on me? Go cry about it?" The words hit her like a punch, but Amara didn't flinch. Instead, her anger began to build, calm but powerful. She stepped forward, her posture shifting from defensive to commanding. "I'm not your punching bag," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I've had enough." Without warning, Amara moved with precision. In one fluid motion, she executed a quick and controlled self-defense maneuver. She twisted her body, using her strength to off-balance Darren. His feet slipped from under him, and he fell to the ground with a thud. The smug look on Darren's face disappeared in an instant as he lay stunned on the pavement, unable to react. The few soldiers who had been nearby watched in silence, the shock of the moment settling over them. Amara stood tall, her breath steady, while Darren struggled to gather himself, humiliated and speechless. She hadn't needed to say anything more. Her actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. Amara walked away from the scene, her steps steady and measured. Her head was held high, her back straight, the weight of the moment still settling around her. The training yard was quieter now, but the echoes of her confrontation with Darren lingered in the air. She didn't look back. In her mind, she reflected on what had just happened. "I won't let anyone take away my dignity," she thought. "I'll stand strong, no matter the fight." Her words echoed within her, a quiet affirmation of her strength. She wasn't just walking away from the confrontation, she was walking toward her own sense of pride and self-respect. As she moved through the yard, her reflection deepened. This wasn't just about the fight with Darren. It was a stand for everything she had worked for the recognition she had earned and the respect she demanded. It wasn't just physical, it was a fight for equality, for the right to be treated with dignity, regardless of what others might say or believe. Behind her, Darren remained on the ground, still recovering from the shock of the moment. He stared at Amara's retreating figure, his expression a mixture of confusion and fear. The arrogance he had carried with him earlier was gone, replaced by the slow realization that the balance of power had shifted. Amara had shown him, in no uncertain terms, that his words didn't hold weight against her strength. His smugness had vanished, leaving only the quiet, uncomfortable recognition that he had underestimated her, and now he knew better. If you believe in justice, equality, and the fight against police brutality, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can amplify these stories and demand change. Hit that subscribe button now, because not hitting it would mean you want to be silent. I will see you in my next story. The end.